So right now what we are going to be doing is, you can see all this my chalk mark. We're going to be starting from this point and sewing in our 1/2 of an inch. So I'm going to start from this point, and you can see, to be very sure of accuracy, I've pinned both my facing and my actual fabric. I've pinned both of them in place. So there's one thing we will do now, and that will be to get a very pointed edge at this point. So we are just simply going to be using a thread. You see, I cut a thread, a normal sewing thread, and then fold that into two. So I'm just simply going to put it in between. You can see in between these two, the facing and the fabric, while my needle is inside the cloth. And I'm going to do this, then stitch. I'm going to make just one stitch. Once I make that one stitch, it would actually have covered this thing I put inside. Then after that, one thing I want to do is, you can see this, you see what is happening. Then I can then flip my fabric to the other side. You see what I did right here. But before we go, I will have to remove this so that I can put this inside. So you just put this inside like this, and then we pin again and continue sewing a 1/2 of an inch. So, and then you can see, when we get to this point, you trace the lines you've also made here. You can see this is the fold line. This is where we fold it. So I've marked this thing a curve line here. So I'm just going to, with the machine, gently do that part, and then you flip this over. And if you remember, we never sew this lining to the lower part here, so we're just going to flip this lining just like this, and then continue to about maybe 1/2 inch before we get to the original, to the ending point of the, what do we call it, of the facing. You can see that that's about 1/2 of an inch before. You can see that, yeah. So once we do this, one thing we want to do, there are two ways you can do this. You can either trim this, your sewing allowance, to about 1/4 of an inch. Yes, and that is what I'm going to do. Or you just trim a little from this, and then you start folding it with your iron to this side. But let's go practice both. So what I'm going to have to do right now is, I'm going to have to cut this to like 1/4 of an inch. Yeah, that is what I'm going to do. You can see this, or maybe even a little smaller than 1/4 of an inch. You can see this excess. You see what I'm doing right here? That is important. You don't want too much bulk around this area. And when you get to this point, yes, you want to cut this point also. You see what I did here? Let's slash this a little. Then you come to that point 1/2 inch before, 1/2 inch before that point, and then you cut also, so that you can cut your 1/2 of an inch, your 1/4 of an inch, right at the bottom part also. So you can see I've trimmed this to about 1/4 of an inch right now. So you see what I did, and what I'm going to do next is flip it over and then baste it in place. So here is it. So I'm sure you can see what we're having here. Now that I've flipped it over to the other side, and then here comes the work of this our thread that we have to put here. So the reason and the usefulness of that thread is so that you get a very pointed edge right here. You can see that. So that is one big usefulness. So that's where you won't struggle. You won't have to be dipping your what do we call it, your scissors or a point this thing or anything. So you just get that, and then you get this very sharp edge. You see that? So that is one very important usefulness of that thread. So, and after it has served its purpose, the next thing you do is remove it. So after removing it, there's one more thing we need to do, and this rule. So before I forget, this is our roll line is fading away. I have to remark it so that I won't get confused. Let me do that quickly. So now we have our roll line. So the next thing you want to do is you want to take your thread, and then all those stitches we've been practicing all along, right now we'll be putting them into action, into use now. Okay, so right now, before we baste this thing into place, one thing we need to take note of, is the fact that how do I call it? What do I say? When you are flipping this over like this, when you're flipping, you want to make sure your seam line is not showing. You see, you want to make sure your seam line is not showing from this point. You understand? So one way to do that is when you want to start basting. Oh, I'm a left-hander, so sorry, I will have to start from the lower part right here. Okay, I think we can still start from here. Yeah, so you want to make sure your seam is not showing when you fold it like this, when you have to fold your lapel. So, and how do you do that is right on the main fabric, you turn your this thing, let me show you. Yeah, you see this, you turn this so that this will be showing from the main fabric, like right at the lapel area. Instead of showing right here, you want to make sure it's showing right here. So that is one thing. So then you start basting. I don't know if someone understands what I'm trying to explain right here. This is the main fabric, and then you want to make sure your seam line is not showing when you fold it. Basting it into place, and basting. So when you get to the break point, this break point, if you have to continue letting this line show on the main fabric, then you will have issues, because this is where the folding ends, if you notice. So you want to like change the position. So from this break line where the folding ends, then you change and let your seam start to show from the inside. You can see that. So you allow your seam to start showing from the inside. That's one little trick to it. Instead of having it show from the outside, and you change it to the inside, and that way you have a how do I call it? So once you have it showing from the inside, when you flip this is showing from here, and when you flip this over, it's no longer showing on this area. And when you get here and you change the seam to this point, then you realize that is not also showing on this part again. So that is one important of that. So let's complete the basting. One thing we need to do before we go ahead to the iron and press all those stuff is, first of all, you see this is the seam allowance that I actually sew from here. So I'm going to be sewing with hand stitches. I'm going to be sewing my pocket, the part of the pocket, right onto that part. And the reason for that is so that you don't have your pocket flipping around inside this thing. You want to stay in a position in just one place. That is one important. So you stitch that. There's this, you can see there's this seam allowance here as well. You do that also here, just to hold that in place. And then another thing you do is right here too, you want to sew it. You can see we still have our sewing allowance right here. You want to sew that just to hold those things in place. That is important. So once we do that, we can then take it to the iron and press. One more thing I actually haven't done here was my chest padding. It was in the other video that I showed you how a chest padding is done. So it's just the exact same way I'm going to be doing it right here. So I will be attaching it. I should attach it before putting this. I'll be attaching this, and since I've shown you a video, I don't think so that won't consume your data or so. I don't think it will be too important to re-show that again. So I'm just going to add it here, and then we are going to have to press all this place of yourself. Another thing before we go is, you see this place as well. You want to stitch this seam allowance onto this pocket also to hold it also in place. After which you can cut some of the excess away. You can see that. Let's cut some of the excess. So you stitch this also in place like this, and then you have all of them stay in one position. You can see this one is staying, and if I had to do it this way, this one will be staying, and the likes. So let's do that now, and then we take it to the to the iron and press.